my turn to fly. I'm proving ground tonight. Try to be the best that I can. I've grown to be a man only human can understand. I fill my lungs with fear and it's my turn to fly. Be with me tonight. I'm right on target. Dream alive. It's my turn to fly. Gotta prove it tonight. Deep in 3043, the refugees survive. The whole of humanity lies in my head. Give me the chance tonight. The proof to you is in my eyes. Bring us to victory. Our dreams become reality. It's my turn to fly. Be with me tonight. I'm right on target. Dream alive. It's my turn to fly. Gotta prove it tonight. It's my turn to fly. Father, be with me tonight. Ooh, I'm right on target. It's my turn to fly. Be with me tonight. I'm right on target. Dream alive. It's my turn to fly. Gotta prove it tonight. Let's do it together. It's my turn to fly. Be with me tonight. I'm right on target. Dream alive. It's my turn to fly. Gotta prove it tonight. Dream alive. Let's do Yeah, how nice of the guy, right? Yeah, smile.
Hello everyone, welcome to this week's 172nd Air Wing video. This is going to be a somewhat more personal review for me because, well, you'll understand as I talk through it. So originally, I was not planning on ordering this particular F-16. I had already, as you may have noticed, collected a few F-16s already, and I just didn't see the value in adding one that was a strict demo bird. True, it looks definitely badass, at least to me, but it just, to me, I already had other collecting priorities. And that was where the matter stood for me until one day I got my alma mater newsletter. My university, as many of you out there understand, issues a periodical once a month chronicling various things that are happening with the college and et cetera, alumni outreach and that sort of thing. So, you know, I get those every month and I kind of flip through them periodically, but it's not a life calling for me to read those magazines. So as I'm checking through my mail and going through the usual litany of bills and notifications and ads and so forth, I see a familiar face on the cover of that month's story. And it was about this Air Force demo pilot. And I thought, well, it looks pretty neat. I'll go read that later as I sift through the mail. But then something lodged in my head. I was thinking somehow there was something about this person that I needed to just investigate further and look at this story. I couldn't figure out what, but there was something really familiar about the subject. So I put down the rest of my letters and grabbed my chair and flipped through the periodical to the story at hand. And it was a article by the SDSU Alumni Association about Captain Amy Rebel Fiedler. And I'm flipping through it and I'm thinking, gee, this is pretty cool that an SDSU grad is, going to the U.S. Air Force and has worked her way up to being the captain of the 2021 and onward Viper demo team. I thought that was pretty nice, reading through the details and so forth. And then I got to the section where it showed her bio, and then it hit me like a ton of bricks because, no joke, no shit, my very first flight instructor on the day that I first took to the air flying an airplane at my own controls was the same Amy Fiedler. And it just hit me like a lightning bolt from Zeus, what the significance of all that was. So in the shot that you have just seen earlier was me doing a recording of my very first flight in a Cessna 172. And she was one of the CFIs that was working at the university. You see, it was normal for flight students to get their coursework done through instructors who had themselves graduated from SDSU's aviation program, as a way of keeping the recent aviation majors employed. And for them to build hours as certified flight instructors, the university would routinely hire recent graduates as instructors. And Amy herself had just graduated, I believe, the year prior to my flight with her in the aviation elective I was taking at the time. So initially, at least as I recall from our conversation, which is definitely over a decade ago, so if she jumps on my throat and says I missed something, that's probably why. But at the time, if memory serves, I don't think she was planning on joining the military at that point. It had come up because my GI Bill was a topic of discussion in regards to just my career plans and how I got to the school and my active duty time as an enlisted and so forth. And I believe her career plans at that point were to go from the CFI course to working at a regional, getting her hours there, and then going on to the majors, which is a relatively well-tread path in terms of moving up in the aviation world as a civilian. So clearly, based on this article, that plan had definitely changed. And, I'm really, really happy for her and her success, and I'm utterly... I'm just amazed that the course of events had come about that not only did my former instructor pilot join the Air Force, fly the Viper, and go through that, but she has worked her way up to being the captain of the demo team, which is just, it's rad. It's pretty freaking cool. So after putting down the magazine, I didn't even get up from my chair. I whipped out my phone, called up eBay, and ordered this exact model. And I honestly, because of that connection, I really didn't care about the price. But I did happen to get it for a relatively reasonable cost. I will say right now that as of early 2023, if you see this video and you are in close proximity to January 2023 and you want this, act fast, because I believe there's maybe 2 places selling it. One retailer is selling it for about $180 and another person is selling theirs for about $300. No, $200 something, $199, something like that. So don't wait, because this thing is a really cool model. And I was glad to say I was able to get it at something less than a stupid expensive price, but don't wait if you want to get this, because this is a good release here. So I will say as a caveat that this exact model is of a rendition of the Viper demo team's F-16 in the 2019 and 2020 seasons when the team was commanded by Major Garrett Toro Schmitz. So this was, of course, before Amy Fiedler took over the team. The color scheme has not changed, thankfully, so I'm glad to see that she's still flying it. I'm sure the name on the side of the canopy is different now, but I think that's pretty much the only difference that the modern F-16 demo team aircraft has versus this release and how it was shown when Toro flew the aircraft. So anyways, that point established, this is a really cool release, and it's one of the rare opportunities that we have to see a U.S. Air Force F-16 in a completely clean fighting configuration. And here's what I mean by that. So originally, as many of you are well aware, the U.S. Air Force F-16 was a result of the lightweight fighter competition of the 1970s. And the objective there was to develop a lightweight single, well, not necessarily a single engine, but a single seat, relatively inexpensive fighting airplane that could be used to maintain air superiority versus the hordes of Soviet MiGs and Sukhois. At the time, there was some justified concern that in the event of a NATO Warsaw Pact Soviet Union war, the 5,000 odd Sukhois and MiGs would just overwhelm the NATO air forces assembled of basically all the air forces in Europe plus the United States and the UK. So with that numeric imbalance in mind, the lightweight fighter competition was a measure intended to correct this. So by generating smaller, lighter airplanes, the NATO forces would have access to an aircraft that could replace some of their older F-104s and F-86s and the like, and it could be fielded inexpensively and in large numbers to oppose the Warsaw Pact air forces in mind. Now, as it so happened, because of political considerations, the F-16 never got that mission. And the reason, at least in U.S. service, is because there was already the F-15. A great deal of intellectual and organizational and financial capital had been spent by the U.S. Air Force, as well as McDonnell Douglas, to develop the F-15 Eagle. And after the F-15's promotion, the U.S. Air Force General Staff was not interested in getting a second airplane. It took Colonel John Boyd going over their heads and arranging a deal with the Secretary of Defense to get the F-16 approved. And at that point, the Secretary of Defense went to the U.S. Air Force Chief of Staff at that time, I believe his name was John McConnell. General McConnell and the Chief of Staff came to a deal with the Secretary of Defense for fielding the F-16 into production, and the caveat there was that the F-16 would be fielded as an air-to-ground aircraft mostly. The term multi-role has been thrown around a lot, but in essence, for most practical purposes, the F-16 is used as an air-to-ground airplane, and this is because the U.S. Air Force brass at the time of the 1970s and the 1980s was very concerned that Congress would compare the lighter, cheaper F-16 to the twin-engine, expensive F-15 and make decisions to either cut the buy of the F-15 or to cut the F-15 completely. This outcome was a political possibility that the U.S. Air Force General Staff was not interested in risking or realizing. So the F-15 would be focused on air superiority, while the smaller, lighter F-16 would be converted and optimized for the air-to-ground role. And it is in that mission that the F-16 predominantly serves today. So when you see an F-16 in U.S. Air Force colors, generally it's operating in some form of air-to-ground capacity. Of course, it does retain some air-to-air capability. However, that's not the primary mission of most F-16 squadrons. Now, that doesn't mean that they don't train to it. It doesn't mean that they don't have the capability for air-to-air. And indeed, the aggressor squadrons do practice that rather routinely. However, as a mission, the air superiority, offensive, defensive, counter-air mission as a dedicated mission set is generally given in the U.S. Air Force tactical order to the F-22 and the F-15. So the F-16 is, again, mostly pivoted to air-to-ground, and as a result, we almost never see them in this kind of clean configuration. And this configuration, the sports car configuration, as Major Schmitz called it in one of his interviews, is the setup that the F-16 was originally designed to operate from. It was originally meant to carry 2 missiles, 1 gun, no radar, and be a lightweight, agile, and easy to field airplane. And thankfully, thanks to the Viper demo team, we're able to see that vision more or less realized, if in a entertaining sort of demonstration fashion. So with that in mind, the F-16, even 40 years after its introduction, is still a very thrilling airplane to see. And it's obvious that when you take off the targeting pod and the pylons and the multiple ejection racks and the bombs and all that sort of draggy kit, the F-16 with 2 air-to-air missiles and just the gun would be a very, very fearsome, close-in visual fighting aircraft. I believe even now some Air Force pilots hold this in the same regard as the F-22 in terms of which airplane is the deadliest within visual range aircraft in the modern U.S. Air Force inventory. So that says something about the capabilities of the design in the air-to-air regime. So with all that, we can look at the model qualities itself, and I'm glad to say that HobbyMaster has done a really good job with this. So in the pros side of things, there is the fuel tank here, which you see, the centerline fuel tank, which is common to other HobbyMaster F-16 releases. However, you'll notice something unique here, and it's that I am displaying this in the in-flight position with the landing gear, in the retracted configuration, and the fuel tank is installed, which is really good because this was something that I'd mentioned in an earlier F-16 review that I did. And it's the fact that with the HobbyMaster F-16s, before, I'd have to check to see which release they implemented this on. I think they did this with the South Dakota Air National Guard 114 Fighter Wing release onward last year, but I'd have to verify that. In essence, what the HobbyMaster has done is they've made a slot in the cover for the landing gear doors so that you can now put the belly tank on with the airplane in the in-flight position, which is amazing. It's a nice investment. It's a small change, but it's an important one because now you don't have to use blue tack to put it on like you did with earlier releases. So that is a pretty cool thing, and I'm glad to see that HobbyMaster is still improving their F-16 tooling even now, because it's, of course, very easy for companies to kind of sit on their laurels with that kind of thing. But again, kudos to HobbyMaster for making that improvement. And on this release, yes, you can put the centerline fuel tank on with the airplane in the in-flight position, which is nice. You'll also notice in some of my earlier intro shots that you can have the F-16 configured for the in-flight role with just the pylon, meaning the centerline hard point here and no fuel tank on. HobbyMaster did include just the pylon with nothing mounted on it, which is awesome as well, because in the mission role of a demo aircraft, sometimes the fuel tank's carried on the centerline, sometimes nothing's carried on the centerline during the demo, and I'm glad to see that there was an empty pylon included. So bravo again to HobbyMaster for doing that. I've pointed out in the past that we should hopefully start seeing more airplane models with just empty pylons on, along with the loadouts that we see normally, because it's not every time that you see a military airplane taking off with a full pylon. I mean, it's just military airplanes do not take off at max takeoff weight every time they fly, right? Sometimes they carry full loadouts, most of the time they don't. We'll use the F-14 as an example of that because the F-14 can carry 6 Phoenixes, but did it ever did that in practicality? Mostly not. There usually wasn't a need operationally for an F-14 to take off, land, or from a carrier in U.S. Navy service with 6 Phoenixes mounted. It could do that, but it just usually didn't. So with F-14s, you see the Phoenix pylons that you can put the Phoenix missiles on, or you can just put nothing on there and have the pylons, which is a historically accurate way to present it, and I'm glad to see that HobbyMaster has followed through with that on this F-16 release. So the other benefit in the pro column is the color scheme. As you've probably noticed in the intro shots, HobbyMaster has basically nailed the paint scheme of this airplane, and I mean down to the albedo, the reflectivity of the paint. It's matte, just like the real airplane. The Viper insignias and the stripes and the yellow markings are bang on. looking at the Instagram photos from Toro Schmitz's Instagram account, as well as the YouTube footage and some of the Air Force public affairs videos and the air show footage, it's all right on the money. And bravo to HobbyMaster for doing that, because if they had just missed one shade, it would have tanked the release. And I'm glad to see that everything, even the squadron logo up here, is done precisely to the real aircraft. So I'm really glad to see that here. So all pros and all reasons why you should probably consider adding this to your collection. And if you're watching this in proximity to January 2023, the sooner the better. On the con side, and I don't necessarily view this next subject as a con, but it is something some people might decide as a con based on their collecting priorities. You should all be aware that this F-16 only comes with the external fuel tank that you see here. It also comes with the empty pylon, as I mentioned earlier, and you have two AIM-9Xs, which go on the ends, one here and one on the opposite wingtip. And that is it for external stores on this airplane. There are no pylons, there are no bombs, there are no targeting pods, there are none of those things that you would attach to this F-16 as one would with other releases. So to me, this is not a concern, because this is a demonstration airplane which generally carries nothing on it while it's doing its primary mission of demonstrating the F-16's maneuvering capabilities to the public. So for me, it is not a drawback at all that it has a bare minimum of stores and attachable accessories. However, you should all be aware of this, just in case you're trying to determine if it fits into your collecting theme or not. The other disadvantage is availability. I've touched on it already in the video, but I'll say it again here. I try to make reviews in proximity to when models are released, because to me it's not a good state of affairs for me to publish a video on a model that you, the viewer, whenever you're watching it, you can't get. That's just not a fair state of affairs for me to do that. That's just the way I see it. It's not some sort of international commandment that YouTubers who make model reviews should follow. It's just the way I do things. I don't like making videos on stuff that people can't get. So this release was an unusual example, because I did not buy this when it first came out in 2020. I basically bypassed this release, and until I picked up that copy of SDSU's Alumni Quarterly article, I was not intending on buying this either. So had I bought this closer to its release date, I'd have been in a better shape to discuss it. However, now that it's been a year and a half later, availability of this model is relatively constrained, and if you are watching this after January of 2023, it's probably going to be harder to get. So if you want one of these, act fast. I can tell you this much: as nice as this one is, I will not be selling mine. So with that, thank you for watching my video. If there are other aircraft that you are interested in watching, including the F-16, feel free to check out my other reviews and showcases on my channel. All of the models that I feature on the 172nd Air Wing channel are mine out of my personal collection. I am not sponsored, I do not get samples, and I do not make advertising deals with any one or any particular manufacturer. So everything that you hear me say about these models is from my own personal interpretation and understanding as an owner of one, and I've paid my own money to get them. So with all that, if you do like my videos and the content I'm posting, consider subscribing. That's my way of knowing that you all think I'm doing a good job so far, and it also allows you to be notified when I do release a new video. I've got some plans on uploading some upcoming videos as 2023 progresses along, so keep an eye out for a new set of videos. I'll just give a hint right now that those of you that liked my Tornado Royal Saudi Air Force video last year, just be aware that it's not going to be the last swing wing airplane I put on the channel. So keep your eyes peeled for the upcoming uploads, and thank you all for your time and for your support of the channel. Thanks for watching.